This is a story about guilds, which were trade associations in the Middle Ages. Let's go back to the 12th century and watch the village of St. Clair grow into a guild town and later into a trading center. In a medieval rural community, life was simple. The serfs of St. Clair worked all the land. Each man himself did many jobs. Some who had special skills spent part of their time working as craftsmen for the small population. Life in the village of St. Clair was simple and self-sufficient, each family satisfying its own needs and the needs of the mighty lord of Montbrett, whose castle and arms gave security to the people of the village. Around the castle walls, serfs and craftsmen began to settle. They and their families needed food. It became necessary to bring food from the surrounding countryside and sell it on the marketplace. The river of Clare, which flows by the town, was a natural highway for trade. Along the river, wharfs were built to handle river traffic. In the next 100 years, the village of St. Clair grew into a town. Old feudal ties with the Lord of Montbrett changed. The town's craftsmen and merchants stopped working on the Lord's land. They substituted money for personal services and paid the Lord's collector a fee for their right to trade. In time, the tradesmen along the Clare River grew prosperous. They formed a sort of chamber of commerce called a guild and built imposing guild halls to house it. Gradually, merchants and craftsmen grew apart. Craftsmen formed their separate guilds. Each craft had its own guild, with its own shield, patron saint, and guild hall. The men who baked bread, the locksmiths of St. Clair, the men who built their houses. Often masters of one trade inhabited the same street and lent it their name. Street names as may still be found in many old European towns. Let us visit the Shoemaker Street in St. Clair and try to picture life as it was in the year 1300, under the control of the guilds in those years of the Middle Ages, when each man's place in the town's society was fixed by custom. The owner of this shop, Peter Brockus, is a fully fledged member of his guild. The guild decreed that Master Brockus could have 2 apprentices. Thomas Lucas had just turned 12 the day when his father brought him to the shoemaker's shop to become Master Brockus's second apprentice. This was a lucky day for Thomas, for rarely was a laborer's son given a chance to rise above his father's station and become a craftsman. Most apprentices were sons or relatives of guildsmen. contract drawn up by the guild was presented to Tom's father by the master shoemaker. It prescribed the length and conditions of Tom's apprenticeship, and the father undertook to provide his boy with money for the annual fee which must be paid the master. With the signing of the contract, Master Brockus took over the role of parent and teacher. And the master promised to look after him in sickness and health, and to teach him the skills of his craft. In the shop of Master Brockus, Tom was to work and live side by side with another apprentice of his own age, and with journeymen who had completed their apprenticeship and now labored for wages. Here they all worked in harmony. The apprentices learned from the journeymen, and the journeymen copied their master. Some journeymen, like old sextors, stayed forever lowly wage earners, sometimes because of poverty, more often because of strict guild regulations, allowing only a few masters to be created at a time. However, in the heart of each journeyman lay the hope of becoming a master one day, of saving enough money to buy tools and a shop of his own, and of proving to the guild wardens that he was ready for a promotion by presenting to them a piece of work worthy of a master, a masterpiece. In a simple craft like the shoemaker's, there was usually hope for most journeymen to reach the top as long as they remained in good standing with the master and with the guild. Master Brockus managed his shop according to guild rules and sold his goods at guild prices. All dealings between the master and his customers were just as immediate and personal as those between the master and his workmen. Work began at sunrise and ended at sunset, according to guild ordinances, so that no one should produce inferior goods made by artificial light. When work was done, the master and his helpers became a family, often eating and living together under the same roof, protected by one patron saint, all secure in the brotherhood of their craft, all united by their interest in it. So life on Shoemaker Street in St. Clair was simple and secure. The guild kept everyone in his place and protected all its members against violent changes. From time to time, officers of the guild called wardens came unannounced to a shop to check on their members. Warden Wat Tigler inquired about the new apprentice and the working conditions in the shop. He and Warden Burns carefully inspected the quality of the materials. Warden Tigler also checked the workmanship of the journeyman. The strength of the thread, the number of stitches in each shoe, the weights and measures used, and the prices charged. Warden Robert of Berne inspected the patterns of shoes, for the guild decided what kind of patterns each master may use. The number of hides in each shop was also limited, so that no craftsman should too far surpass the other in his productivity, nor hoard scarce materials. But Master Brockus's shop is only one of many shoemakers' shops that Wardens Tigler and Berne inspected regularly. Let us follow them to the guild hall and see how they, as officers of the guild and important townsmen, helped shape the fortunes of St. Clair and ultimately that of the guilds. In this proud black lacquered hall, guild officers held regular meetings to listen to reports on the conduct of all those men in town who practiced their particular trade. Warden Wat Tigler gave an account of his inspection. He reported on business, on births, deaths, or marriages of members of his guild, and on activities of competing trades in St. Clair, and on demands from the ruling lord of Montbrett. Proposals submitted to the guild before the meetings were discussed and voted upon. The secretary read off the list of offenders and proposed fines.
Brothers, in the case of journeyman Johannes Barber for wrong in connection with the wages due him, by our ordinance number 3, Thomas Lombard, master of aforesaid journeyman, must give him satisfaction.
Masters, are we all agreed?
Aye. Aye.
And by the following must further fines be paid. By Master Roger Aldrich for the producing of faulty goods, 5 pieces of silver. By the German merchant named Geet for being a foreigner without license from the
For the
guild
needs of a simple town economy, this guild system sufficed. It could avoid the evils of unemployment, of speculation, or of excessive wealth. But at the core of this system, there were already germs of a new type of organization which the guild's own leaders will permit to emerge in a not-too-distant future. More and more officers of influential guilds also became members of the town government. Wat Tigler and Robert of Berne represented the Shoemakers' Guild in the town hall. It was an important day in the history of St. Clair when Wat Tigler accompanied the Lord of Montbrett to the town hall. There, at a ceremonious meeting, the nobleman granted the town of St. Clair a charter of freedom in return for an annual fee. The mayor of St. Clair received the charter written in Latin and read it to the town council.
Et alis consuetudinibus et libertatibus, ad huis modi gildam pertinentibus.
The Lord's charter granted the citizens of St. Clair freedom of their city, monopoly of their trades, exemptions from all tolls, taxes, and services, and gave them the right to control foreign craftsmen and merchants who would come to trade in their town.
Manentes et eniadem villa liberi permea.
With the freedom of the town thus assured, the citizens got ready to celebrate the Day of St. Crispin, the patron of the Shoemakers' Guild. Even when mystery plays began to be acted out in the church square, the guild took charge of the production. A new chapter in guild history began when important families in St. Clair, like the Tiglers and the Burns, organized trade partnerships and pooled their families' resources to carry their trade beyond the city limits. The guilds themselves fell more exclusively into the control of these rich townsmen who aimed to restrict them to their own families by raising the term of apprenticeship, the size of initiation fees, by introducing elaborate ceremonies and costly liveries for its members. Gradually there came the time when a distinction appeared between important guilds and lesser guilds. Members of important guilds, like this great-grandson of Wat Tigler, were guildsmen in name only. He, for instance, supplied raw materials to lesser guildsmen and paid cash for the finished goods they produced for him. And as roads improved and the king's government increased security, Trader Tigler carried his business even farther from St. Clair. He sought trading partners among the most influential men of his time. These were the men who now dominated guild life. Some of the merchandise these wealthy traders bought and sold came from faraway lands. Rarely did they know the people who worked for them. Their agents paid the wool pickers and carders, the dyers of cloth and their helpers, the weavers and the cloth makers, all of them still members of their small craft guilds, but all ultimately dependent on the men who would buy their goods. And though some of these men might have still retained memories of the old guild life, its personal brotherhood would no longer hold any meaning. The small craftsmen who worked on the outskirts of St. Clair were doomed to become no more than hired workers, increasingly dependent on the master of the important guilds for their raw material, for their markets, and often for their machinery. Then came a day when a master got the idea of joining several workers together in one of his houses to manufacture goods for him to sell. And something akin to the modern factory system was born. Not until much, much later were the working men to form protective societies, which we now call labor unions. Thus, in the 14th and 15th centuries, new classes emerged out of the society of the Middle Ages. These workers coming out of the Tigler mills in St. Clair were a new class of wage earners without land. So came to an end a great era of history, the era of the guilds which served well the needs of emerging towns, but had to give way to the demands of expanding trade. Wealthy townsmen became patrons of art. Magnificent buildings sprang up in such towns as Bern, Colmar, Brussels, or Bruges to house the guild halls of various trades. Throughout Western Europe, signs of this era stand to this day.